Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Street Art Toronto and MUSE Arts Health and Wellness Panel Series. My name is Catherine Campbell, and I use the pronouns she and her. I'm wearing a pink and black sweater with a black turtleneck, and behind me is a white wall with a curtain on the side that's multicolored. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for joining us today for the first month of the panel series. To start us off, I would like to start by offering a land acknowledgement. We believe that as we do this work, we must first commit ourselves and continue on the path of reclamation, healing, and most especially truth. We make a commitment to being an ally, to ask questions, to listen, to learn, to understand our privilege, and achieve the reconciliation we all must help to achieve. We strive to form a new relationship with the original peoples of the land, one based on honor, trust, and respect. We acknowledge that the land currently referred to as Toronto is on traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, and other nations of Anishinaabe and Seneca, Oneida, Mohawk, and other Haudenosaunee nations, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. The land acknowledgement I offered has been developed based on work with, connections to, and directions from Indigenous community partners and artists that we work with. I will now pass it on to my colleague Jason, who will offer a separate and an additional ancestral acknowledgement.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and it truly is a pleasure to be here today to share this space with everyone. Though I am not a person of African descent, I'm committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and history that continues to impact Black communities in Canada. As part of this commitment, I would like to also acknowledge that not all people came to these lands as migrants and such. Specifically, I wish to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. In support of the City of Toronto's ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, I pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Thank you so much. I'll pass it back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Jason. I'd like to introduce our team members, Carolyn Taylor, and our manager, Randy McLean. Together with Jason, we work with Street Art Toronto. We're an initiative of the City of Toronto's Transportation Services Division and consists of a suite of innovative programs intentionally designed to showcase, celebrate, and support street, mural, and graffiti artists and artwork throughout Toronto. Our programs and projects are rooted in a set of values that demonstrate the positive and powerful impacts of diversity and inclusion, foster community engagement and civic pride, add color and vitality to neighborhoods, encourage active transportation, showcase Toronto artists, and contribute to their skills development. We mentor emerging talent and create opportunities for positive engagement amongst residents, business owners, and operators, as well as artists and arts organizations. I'll now hand it back to Jason to introduce MUSE Arts and Paolo Gomez.
Thanks again, Catherine. Working with community partners, MUSE Arts creates spaces for emerging artists from equity-seeking groups to showcase their work, to access opportunities for professional development, and to engage communities meaningfully and actively in hands-on, high-quality arts education integrated to issues of social justice. In 2020, MUSE Arts partnered with Street Art Toronto as part of the Street Art Toronto Partnership Program to create a project to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Earls Court Park. The community mural was painted by Alex Usquiano and assisted by a group of local artists in a design created with neighborhood participation. We are honored to continue to work with MUSE Arts and look forward to the conversation today. Paola Gomez is a trained human rights lawyer, community worker and public speaker, community artist, and a writer. Paola is the co-founder and director of MUSE Arts and the creator, director, and producer of Happening Multicultural Festival. Paola's work with refugee and newcomer communities have been greatly recognized in Canada, where she arrived as a refugee. Paola's community arts work focuses on community and peace building. Paola is currently a professor at Centennial College. Please join me today in welcoming Paola Gomez.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I want to welcome you all to this afternoon's conversation. Health and safety as part of artist wellness and what it means to work in public spaces. What an important conversation when we are about to start mural season, when we are in the year of public art, and when we need to hold space for conversations that will contribute to new generations of mural artists and artists in general. This is a very, very important conversation, and I am so happy that we have the opportunity to have such a great and talented artist this afternoon with us. I want to share with you that this live streaming is being recorded and will live on YouTube for future analysis and for future consideration for those who are not able to be here in this space. I also want to thank both Maryanne and Brittany for support us in making sure that this programming in this conversation is accessible to many community members. I want to check with you as well that we have a little bit of a plan here in terms of how this conversation will go. The conversation will be informal because we are reaching out to artists' personal experience and views as we touch on the topic of health and safety and working on public space. So we want to have first a space for each artist to share a little bit of their practice, what they are doing, and probably what their plans are. Also, they are going to share with us their views and comments on today's topic, safety and what it means to work in public spaces. Then we are going to have conversations that questions that are going to come out of those interactions. Later, we have some announcements, and then that's how 1 hour and 30 minutes will pass this afternoon. I know it's going to be such a rich conversation. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce to you Cindy Scaife. Cindy was born and raised in Toronto. She has been a full-time professional mural artist for over 28 years. Her mural career includes works for private, commercial, and corporate clients, educational institutions, and public art projects. One of Cindy's careers highlight was working with acclaimed American artist Frank Stella as the studio manager for his studios in Toronto, New York City, and Houston, Texas. That is very exciting. I had shared with Cindy that I went to look into her social media platforms, and I also learned that she has a beautiful, beautiful cat. So I enjoyed that very much. Cindy, welcome to this space. I hope you can turn your video and your camera on.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm perfect. Thank you so much for being here. What a beautiful work you have. And we would like to open the space for you to share a little bit about, your career, 28 years in the field. And I know that you do other things, but we will focus today on your mural career.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel today. I started painting murals more in a commercial venture. So I was painting large scale, kind of like billboards that were popular at the time on the sides of buildings in downtown Toronto and elsewhere. Eventually, it became more of a fine art practice in producing murals and creating designs for different clients. And then most recently, I've been working with the York Region District School Board, working with students and creating murals within the school environment. And then most recently, I've been fortunate to work with StreetARToronto, and I helped develop and implement the mural program, which is beautifying the cycle track barriers in downtown Toronto and in Mimico and also near York University. That's a little bit about me.
Thank you very much. Well, definitely, I know there is much, much more. As I said, I had the opportunity to go and see your illustrations that are beautiful, and your murals are just breathtaking. So thank you very much for that. Before we pass to introduce our next artist that is invited to this conversation, I would like to ask you what it means to, to work on public spaces, in the outdoors, and how that, what that feel of safety is for you, particularly when you are working probably close to the streets and all these things. So I would like to definitely hear your comments on that and keep that so we can continue this conversation.
I think there's multiple aspects to that question, and as an artist working in a public space, there's the you have to be aware of your environment and that you're kind of sharing the space with pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. So you have to make sure that you're always taking steps to keep your particular area, working area safe, and also making sure that you're keeping the area safe for your fellow citizens. And then as a female artist, I think there's another aspect to making sure you feel safe at all times and comfortable in the environment that you're working in. So one example would be perhaps, only keeping one earbud in while you're working so that you're definitely more aware of what's going on around you. And sometimes it's easy to zone out and just concentrate on your artwork. So you're kind of having to keep a few things happening, juggling things at one time.
Absolutely. You make reference to a very important element, and it's the fact that, as artists, we may yes, and rightfully so, right? We just engage directly with the artwork, and sometimes we just zoom out of our surroundings. So thank you very much for that, Cindy. I already have few questions I want to follow up with, but I want to make sure those who are at home listening to and watching this live streaming have also an opportunity to meet the other two wonderful artists that are joining you in this conversation. Thank you so much. And it is definitely my pleasure to introduce to you Rob Matejka. Rob Matejka has embraced art as a medium for positive social interaction and enjoys animating the communities and the people he works with, making art accessible for all through workshops, mentoring, and adding to the growing outdoor public gallery. I really like that. Rob has been an arts educator and a mentor for over 15 years and has partnered with several Toronto organizations. Rob enjoys using murals to create immersive spaces while coordinating large-scale projects engaging large number of community members. Rob, thank you so much for being here, for accepting this invitation, and for bringing your knowledge and your wisdom into this space as well. So as follow, I will leave the space for you to share a little bit more about your practice. I know that there is way more work to present than the few images that we present today after 15 years of a career, but would like to hear from you.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everybody. Hello. First, I'd like to say I redid the math. It's actually been over 25 years. So small miscalculation. I started years ago in the City of Toronto's graffiti transformation programs as one of the youth, fresh out of high school, getting involved in a local community, painting. And I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the interaction with the community, with the neighborhood schools. So I stayed in that path, and through various projects, I kept on taking on more and more responsibility until I finally started coordinating and managing projects of my own that I was leading, and had the pleasure of then mentoring and educating the path of many other young people coming up the same way that I started or similarly. And then I've also branched into instructing. So instructing with murals and with other art forms as well through community organizations, the City of Toronto, different school boards, the Toronto Public Libraries, and other communities. I've done most of my work in and around the GTA, but I have had the pleasure of traveling around Canada a little bit as well with mural art. So that was a pleasure, and working with many people. What I really enjoy is just continuing to develop and facilitate the development of the upcoming artists, the next generations of mural artists, and making sure that they have all the support that they need to enjoy their careers as safely as possible as well.
No, thank you for sharing that. Well, that's a 10 years miscalculation. So, but good for you. And I think it's very inspiring that you're also sharing with us that you started as a young person, and dreaming of this, of this career, and now you're here, passing on the knowledge and passing on the passion for this type of work. So this is very much appreciated. I had the opportunity to see some of your work. I not only realized that you work in a really large scale projects, but also that they are pretty much out there next to the street. So and the use of of the type of equipment that you use in your projects, given the nature of them. I would like to place the same question that I asked Cindy, and it is, what it means to you in terms of your health and safety to work on those public spaces.
Well, there's a lot to cover, and Cindy started as well. I think that being aware of your surroundings is very important, and having others be aware of you as well. I think having things that identify you as somebody working are great. So even something simple like a safety vest that allows people to recognize that you're working, you're in a place of work. It also helps create, I think, a professional boundary between you and the rest of people walking by, where they are welcome to engage in conversation, but they still should respect the fact that you are working. I think that's important. I think it's important to have a support system. I do not enjoy much myself, even for social reasons, painting and working by myself. I think it's very beneficial for people to always have at least one person that they are working with for social, for support, help problem solving. If there's a situation that arises, having that support or that extra brain to brainstorm and figure out the best solution. Even something simple like taking lunch and washroom breaks, make sure that the site doesn't remain unattended. And you don't have to pack up all your supplies just because you're leaving to go to the washroom. So I think it's safety, handling equipment. It's always great to have another pair of hands and eyes around if something was to happen to you and you're alone. Then you're really at the mercy of passersby, or if there are any passersby. Sometimes we work in areas that are more secluded, and somebody coming by to help us if we do get into a situation we can wait some time for that. So it's better to have somebody around. So something that I always stress with people, and even people that are starting, new upcoming artists, is always try to have somebody there with you, even if it's a family member, a friend, etc., just coming by to check up on you or be there. They can read or something, even if they're not contributing to the work itself, but working and having somebody there, I think, is one of the most important things.
Rob, thank you for sharing this. Definitely so much to unpack, and I already have so many questions prepared here as we continue exploring the theme, and honestly taking advantage of the wealth of knowledge that is here in the wisdom that is here. Thank you so much. Now, and as a suit, I will invite Jessey, Phade, Pacho. Admittedly, Jessey's name was very easy for my Spanish to pronounce. Jessey is a renowned graffiti artist honored by the Canadian government and armed forces for his exceptional work. Jessey has dedicated his life to mural making, aerosol art, traditional graffiti, and checking graffiti-related misconceptions. Since overcoming homelessness through his craft, Jessey has positioned himself as a leader on the industry for over 10 years. He has managed multiple professional artist teams and delivered high-impact programming across Canada. Jessey's work builds community and breathes new life into spaces that could use both color and commerce. Jessey, thank you so much for being here, and we definitely invite you to turn your camera and join us in this conversation. I had shared before we go live that I had seen your Unity video. Congratulations. And you said something in that video that was, it really touched me, and it is that this meant a lot, receiving this recognition meant a lot, because in one hand, graffiti has been stigmatized, right, as illegal, in dangerous or ugly, all these statements and elements that are being expressed into the aesthetics, and yet you are also being recognized for the impact of your work by the government and by the armed forces, many of which are the ones that stigmatize this type of work. So very, very grateful for your presence here. I have already give out a lot of what you were going to say, but I was so excited about this. So thank you so much. And we want to open the space for you to share a bit of your practice. 10 years now doing the practice, I imagine, professionally. And we would love to hear from you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. So I am Jessey. I go by Phade, which is my graffiti nickname or moniker, if you will. I've been a practitioner of graffiti art in aerosol for 20 years and painting murals professionally for about 15 years. I believe this year makes it my 15th year. And I love what I do. I take pride and pleasure in working with community and building community through art, and also take a lot of pride in beautifying space. I think that Toronto is a city that's really opened up in terms of public art and mural work, and it's amazing to see how many people are so involved and wanting to become so much more involved in public art, especially with the oncoming of the pandemic and lockdowns. I've seen the city really turn around and be more welcoming of public art, and specifically of graffiti, or at least aerosol murals in that sense. So it's very interesting, and I'm just really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for expressing this. Hey, I'm noticing that these artists are having issues with the numbers. So it's 15 years of professional career. Good for you. We had in our little bio that they were 10 years. So I'm glad that you also corrected that number here, because it's also honoring your journey, honoring the process that I'm sure you have gone through in order to be here at this moment, at a moment in your career where you also mentor, where you also teach the craft to others, and that others will also see you as a role model, particularly youth. Again, I had the opportunity to see the impactful work that you are doing across Canada with youth, and this is extremely inspiring. I would like to invite you to comment on what it means to be safe working in public spaces with everything that you bring with you, your love for the art, but the type of art that you do, who you are as a human being, and all your identities that come together when you are there at the public exposure. I would like to definitely hear your comments on this, as then we will engage in conversations that will again support others for the future.
Sure thing. So safety in public space, as the other artists have mentioned, there's a lot to unpack, and I'll try not to touch on sort of what's been brought up already, because those things are super important, and I just don't feel that the repetition is needed. But thinking about safety in public space, I guess one of the things that's important to me is, and I'm not sure how to frame this, but I like to say check your mental, meaning before you even get to your job site or intended mural, just make sure that you yourself are in a good mind frame. Make sure that you're not stressed out. Make sure that you're not bringing any external things going on to that mural or that job site itself, because those things, although they seem like nothing, could pile on and could pick up and add up and really cause some serious stress later on in the day. Aside from any sort of emotional considerations of making sure that your mental and your heart are good, you also want to be sure that your team, if you're working with a team, is in a space to operate. They feel safe emotionally and physically to operate in that space. Aside from these things, I think it's very, very important to know, not just know your surroundings, but to know the demographic of the areas that you're working in. Because you could, for example, have a mural in a priority neighborhood, and the folks who live there aren't necessarily the most comfortable with or have experience dealing with all different types of ethnicities or different groups of people. And I've seen it in the past where folks from the community do come out and do get aggressive because the outsiders are here that don't belong. So it's knowing your surroundings, but it's also knowing the demographics of the area that you're working in and having strategies to deal with things that may come up. Having a support person that you can talk to, having people on site that can help to watch the site itself so the artist can focus on the artwork, having folks on site to know about the project that can engage with the community so that the artist can focus on the artwork and still have that interaction with the community. These are the things that I feel are extremely important, especially when you're working in public in the summer seasons, especially when it's busy and people are out and about. Other considerations in terms of safety in public space, I would say is, also consider the medium that you're working with. I am a graffiti artist, and as such, I use aerosol paint. And not everyone is as accepting or comfortable with the medium, especially if you're painting in a laneway. You could have permission, you could be there under contract, but it is a thing. There is a stigma that exists with this medium, especially when considering where you're painting, which location. Aside from that, I'm not sure if there's any other considerations to take. I just think it's very important to be aware at all times of your surroundings and of your person, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And something that you make reference that is extremely important, check your mental, because sometimes it's not only about the surrounding, but also how we are how we are receiving the surrounding as well. So they are impacting the space, but the space is also impacting us. So how ready we are to do that piece. Thank you so much for that. And of course, I have many questions here, and I will invite you, Jessey, to stay on, and I will definitely invite Cindy and Rob to join us to have a conversation. And thank you so much for joining in. So one part that comes to mind, and I'm going to go into each of your comments and highlights. I want to touch on what it means to work in a community, and the importance of probably knowing that community versus not knowing the community, and how that influences that sense of safety. And I think Jessey touched on that in relation to what it is to work in a community that you have not been there before, and what it means to do a work that happens prior to be able to comfortably be in that space. And I would like to open the space for any of you to share your thoughts on knowing the community that you're working with, or doing a work in a process prior to getting into doing the painting or the mural that you may be working on. If you want to share your knowledge and experience on that, that would be great.
I'll go.
Thank you.
I like to always do a bit of a site visit first before I start. So familiarize myself with the area, and if there's any physical issues, like if you're painting near a sidewalk, if it's uneven, if you'll have to deal with something like that, that could be hazardous for your ladders or your scaffold or whatever. Also, figuring out how you're going to get to the site every day, and if you're driving, where you can park safely, and if you happen to go into later hours of the day, so that you feel comfortable getting back home and taking your supplies back and forth. So that's my initial thoughts, and also surveying the community, finding out about the community, so that when you're designing your project, it's the potential to be more successful, and having a positive reaction to your piece because of your knowledge of the community, so that it relates back to who lives there and what message you're trying to convey.
Okay. I'll add that I think it's, well, most of the projects that I've done have been the results of much community consultation. So it always helps when the community, or some members at least of the community, know that a mural is coming and know that a project is coming. I enjoy working there in the community because it allows people to get to know the project, get to know the artists, whereas opposed to when you do a project sometimes on panels done in the comfort of an indoor space, a studio, and then you just bring it finished and install it, it's more like a billboard where the people had very little heads up maybe about the fact that it was coming, and pretty much it's something that sprung on the community overnight. When you have the pleasure of working there for a couple of weeks, months, whatever the timeline is, people get to see the process and appreciate the process more. A lot of people take the process of creating art for granted, I find. We don't know the mystery behind it. It's sort of like taking a car into the shop. We don't see what goes on behind the scenes. So doing a mural in the community allows people to develop more of an appreciation for the art form, for the time that it takes, the process, get to know the artist a little bit, etc. I always find it great to be friendly, diplomatic, engaging. So even allowing room for the community to still be engaged in the project as the project is being worked on. I always try to identify spaces, so if kids or youth or anybody sort of hanging out watching, have some spaces maybe of solid colors that I can say, offer them a brush or a roller and say, would you like to do a little bit? And having that interaction to the project, I see that it helps strengthen the connection between the community and the project. It also allows people to have more of a connection where maybe years down the line or a couple years down the line, when they're out and likely to maybe vandalize something or tag something, they'll think twice about maybe vandalizing a project that they've worked on or that their brother or sister worked on. And they weren't sort of alienated from the project. They were now engaged and were a part of the project. I think it's important to try to engage the community and all members of the community as much as we can with the projects that we do. And I don't know if I'd want to be part of projects where that wasn't a possibility.
Thank you so much for that. How about you, Jessey?
To be honest, I'm not sure, Rob, that was so eloquently put and so much info in there. I'm not sure if there's anything I can add. I feel like everything I would say you've pretty much touched on in that segment there. The only other thing I'd say is, in terms of interacting with communities and getting to know the community you're working in, is one of the approaches I like to employ when we're going into communities is kind of like Tetris. You kind of get in where you fit in. I find commonalities in the community, things that I might make it easier to connect with people. And that's kind of the starting point. And then you build that rapport and the relationship from there. I think it's important for folks to know that you are coming there to do a project and to do your mural and your artwork, but there's importance that comes with a personal connection leading into the project as well. And I think that's what I'd like to add.
Thank you so much for that. This is so exciting because, you know, my main art form is community arts, and you are just putting all these elements together. And that's, as I agree, very eloquent description of things that need to happen for artists to feel safe when working on these public spaces. Something that Jessey had mentioned a little bit earlier is the fact that, you know, in that interest of interaction that community members may have with you, and want to know what's going on, why is it being done, because I didn't hear about this, etc., etc. So you may have a plan of having this mural in 3 days, but you may also engage in these very fruitful and beautiful conversations that are actually taking you away from doing the piece and doing the work. So how you reconcile that, how you work on those pieces when you have community members that are either very engaged and want to be talking to you the entire day. Those are also the ones that bring the juice, right? So, but you also will have those community members that are like, I don't like this. These are not aesthetics that we have in this place. This is ugly, or this is something that I wasn't asked and I don't want to hear. So how you deal with those elements, if that has ever happened to you? I'm sure that given the years in the field, maybe you had one or two of those encounters, and would love to hear, you know, first, how that impacted you, and two, how you kind of overcome that and take the learning piece from it to move forward.
I can
Jessey,
jump
do
in.
you want to go first?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I guess they would say this is kind of the elephant in the room. Like, being a graffiti artist, you deal with a lot of that sort of stuff. You do deal with a lot, and you can fully be painting with permission, contracted to be in place. But again, when it comes to the medium and folks not really being aware of what's going on, or not having, I guess, notice beforehand that there is a mural going up, you can get some of that feedback. And in my experience, I just approach with respect and a smile. As frustrating as it can be, you're there to be a professional, right? And so I want to be a professional in every sense of the word. And so when I'm dealing with people that are aggressive and, you know, negative about what I'm doing, I just approach from a respectful place, because I'm there to build a connection. And I genuinely do want to know sort of what about this is bothering them and what they're not liking. At the same time, though, and this is with me personally, I've had to just be a little more firm in my communication to them, that the sense that, you know, this is a project that's been underway for weeks, months, could be years on end. There's a lot of resources that have gone into this. If they wanted to voice their opinion, there's been multiple opportunities for community consultation. If they have further things that they'd like to voice, I sometimes have given my professional email out and said, email here. Or if there's like a contact person for the overall arching project, sometimes it's helpful to pass along that information just so they can get more learnings about where this project is going or coming from. But in essence, I think it's important to be respectful and approach with a smile, because people do feed off of your energy. But also at the same time, there's a balance of having to be firm in your defense of the project that's happening. Because another thing that I've seen happen too is that, you could shut down and crumble, for lack of a better term, and then that has an even bigger negative impact on the project itself, because the team who's working with you is seeing and feeding off this, and then the whole thing could just become uncomfortable if you're not defending the project itself. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's sort of where my mind went.
It definitely does. Thank you so much for that.
I'll pick up where what Jessey was saying. I think the respect and smile goes a long way. I think validating the project, like Jessey was saying, explain that there's a history behind this project, how the project came to be. Make information available, whether it be local counselors or whoever the partners are, that could answer to some of the community concerns about how the process was. Maybe you don't have time to take time out of the project painting to explain the whole process to people, but making sure that they're aware that this is the result of a process where the community was engaged. And the being respectful is very important. I think we never want to have friction in the community when at all possible, even from the standpoint that somebody could then have ill feelings towards the project, maybe come and vandalize it overnight, or just make the situation more challenging and uncomfortable than it needs to be. Fortunately, in the 15 or 25 years, I can't really think of many incidences of high concern that I was personally involved in. There have been a couple times when I have had to explain that this is the project that has been approved, and sort of leave it at that, see if I can engage that person. Maybe next year we can paint something that is more appealing to them. Ask them what they would like to see. So make note of that, making people know and feel that they are important as well, and their voice and concerns are important. Maybe they didn't get their vision up on the wall this year, but they might get it up on the wall next year. So just always leaving the door open for positive interaction and that person to still contribute positively.
I agree with everything Rob and Jessey have said. Most of the time, fortunately, it's pretty positive feedback from the community. And if you find yourself working in a particular spot for, it could be like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then the potential is there that you're going to see this same person, community member, over and over again on their way to get their coffee or just their daily walk. So it does benefit you to approach everybody with a smile and a kind disposition. You just have to kind of gently make them aware that you are kind of working, so that there's a limit to how long you can engage with people. But most people understand. And for people who are a little bit unpleasant or maybe unhappy with the project that's going on for various reasons, I also direct the individual to whoever is overseeing the entire projects, if they want to direct any of their complaints or concerns to them. So usually they understand that you're an artist doing a task, and once you supply them with someone who they can vent their frustrations to, they're usually able to carry on with their day. But most of the time, I'm happy to say it's a joyful experience to have people come up to you and tell you they're loving your work. And it's nice because often you're working by yourself in your studio, so to get out in the public and have conversations with people, it's fulfilling to get feedback right away.
I am loving this so much. It's like I am in my crowd. This is just so exciting. Thank you so much for sharing all this, and definitely sharing your heart here as well, because it is this, what I'm hearing is also a testament of your love for the engagement and the willingness to start in that, to be part of that engagement. Cindy, you said something that is so true, and is so different to do the work isolated at the studio versus doing the work in the community, particularly when you work for 2-3 weeks and then you are now a member of that community. And so you also develop relationships in that space. And having said all that, it is also true that while working, while our bodies are there, outdoors, exposed to the elements, we're exposed to so many other things than the elements. And I would like to ask, what measures you take, what preventive measures you take to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. I have seen it, artists don't bring food and don't eat, and like, okay, I'm gonna just work for 1 hour, and 1 hour turns 10. Guilty of that. Or sometimes is the fact that you may want to go and work very early because you don't have to, you don't have to work with so many, or you don't have to interact with so many people that actually are interrupting the work. Sometimes when you're doing sidewalk painting, they are stepping in your work, things like that. So what measures do you take on that? Before that, I want to express gratitude to everybody that is writing in the live streaming and welcoming all your questions. Please put them there, and we are going to make sure to open a space for your questions here as well. So I'm opening the space for that insight on the measures that you take in order to take care of yourself, to be able to be out there, with the vulnerable bodies that we have.
Okay, I'll jump in this time. So to me, eating is very important, and staying nourished and hydrated. My friends often say, and people that I work with say, if I'm with you, Rob, I know I'm not going to be hungry. I'm a grazer, and I always encourage people to take breaks when they're working with me to make sure that they're feeling good, whether it's just taking some shade from the sun. If they need it, they know best, and they can gauge best that they need it. We, I think, can all relate working in the field, that it's not something that we can say, okay, I'm turning this on from 9 till noon and then from 1 till 4:30. The elements, even the interactions maybe that we have with community members, they can be physically, mentally draining. So whatever recharge time we need and refueling time we need, I think is essential to take. I would never show up without food or liquids to the site, because it's very easy, like you said, to just get lost in the moment and then take it for granted. And if it's not there, see no evil, hear no evil, then it's less of a reminder that we actually need to nourish and rehydrate ourselves. But I think it's very important to come prepared, to have food, to have liquids, be respectful of the elements and the weather that you're going to be working in. So if you need a hat, umbrella for shade, whatever can bring you shade. If you need sunscreen, we've had projects where in the past there was no shade. And so what we've done is had team members rotate and hold boards and hold umbrellas for other team members so they can have shade. And so the person that was getting scorched was holding for a little while, and then they would rotate and be painting while somebody else was getting scorched and creating the shade. So just making sure that people know that they are welcome to take these breaks. You welcome those breaks, maybe even lead by example and have them feel more comfortable by seeing them you take these breaks. So now they know they're more validated and feel more secure that they can take those breaks to recharge as well.
That sounds good to me. I must admit, one of the things I look forward to when I'm working on in a different area of the city is treating myself to buying my lunch or buying my dinner. So I'll bring a drink and a snack, but I'll seek out different restaurants in the area. So it kind of adds to the community experience, and you get to know, I'm a bit of creature of habit, so I'll probably go to the same restaurant over and over again, or corner shop. So that's kind of a neat aspect of working in the community. You see something different, meet new people, and support their businesses too. So, but eating is important for sure. And also, I was working on a mural last year, and it was in October. So we would get direct sun, and you'd be super warm, and then the sun would pass over the buildings, and you'd be in complete shade. So you'd go from being hot almost in October, because the sun would reflect off the wall, to being like freezing. So you have to be, layering is important, and being prepared with maybe an extra set of gloves in case you lose one or they get wet or something like that. Also, on that job, I discovered a little kind of rechargeable electronic, it looked like a bar of soap, and it heats up. So it's, you can keep it in your pocket, and gives you a little boost of warmth as you're going along. And it's a bit more environmentally friendly, as opposed to the kind of disposable little packs you can get, the heating bags. In the sun, it's always important to have some kind of shade nearby where you can kind of rest and recharge yourself. So it can be very depleting. So maybe even more frequent breaks when it's the blazing hot summer. One other thing I was thinking about this. I've invested in a pair of really decent work boots, and even though they're a bit clunky, I find that it gives me better support. And at the end of the day, my feet are not as battle worn, so that they support my ankle. I have better insoles in them. So it kind of gives your body extra, I guess, an extra boost that maybe you don't get from just having a pair of Converse on or something like that. So, and they'll last for a long time. So it's a good investment as a piece of equipment. So that's me.
Yeah, I'll jump in with a couple other things. First of all, I just want to say you're both way better than I am in terms of the self-care portion of this. I often find I'll get to the wall and I want to go right away before I've even started painting. So once I do start, it's kind of a process where I'm just going right until the end, at least if it's like one of my own personal sort of I'm painting. But I do think it's important to have food with you, but also ensure that there's snacks on site for the team. Maybe you have a team of youth artists, maybe you have a team of some professional artists that you're working with. But I guess I'm trying to say we don't always know what people's situations are in their own private lives. And I've been in scenarios in the past where I've just, as a way to boost team morale, just had snacks on site. And then it's been divulged to me later on how much that really helped and impacted, right? So small things like that I find really go a long way. In terms of working warm weather and safety, yeah, I mean, having shade around to decompress is extremely important, as well as hydrating. Like, I can't stress enough how important it is to hydrate, not just when you're out in the sun experiencing it, but also like before you even get there. Make sure that you have enough in your body to keep you going. Similarly, for working in the cold, sometimes extreme colds, it really helps to, and this may sound a little funny, but it helps to sort of urinate and get that out of your system, because what happens is when you urinate, your body is redistributing the rest of the heat that was keeping that liquid warm. So it's just a little small trick to help keep you warmer when you're working out in cold weather. Dressing appropriately for the elements is, I think, one of the most important things. And stretching is huge, at least for me personally. And it's not so much about having little stretches throughout the day, but I find doing like a really in-depth stretch before you get to your job site just kind of helps set a certain rhythm for the rest of the day. You get to the wall feeling a little loose, feeling a little even better mentally, maybe some endorphins have spiked. And having smaller stretches throughout the day, I find definitely helps to keep you loose and limber. And the support in terms of the shoes, Cindy, you mentioned that earlier, having the right shoes to wear is a definite benefit. Personally, when I'm working at heights, I love to wear steel toe boots. And as much as those can get heavy, it is the world of difference in terms of support, especially if you're working on a ladder, because you have such a small surface you're standing on. And the steel toe boot gives you such a solid foundation and platform to stand on. So I've just found at the end of the day, my calves went from being like torn apart to like, oh, I can still walk, you know? So those are, I guess, some of the things that I find important. But more than anything, I think I would stress the eating and stretching and hydrating, definitely.
I'll just add and sort of pick up. I think I'll say I took footwear for granted for most of my career until a few years ago. I started to get back problems and realized how important footwear was. So I went from using my old beat up shoes as my painting shoes to buying shoes specifically for painting. So I think that makes a great difference. Thank you guys for reminding me of that and bringing that up as well. And the other thing that Paula touched on, I think initially, is a little bit of even the timing of the project. And so if your wall is in direct sunlight for the first part of the day and afternoon it's in shade, then maybe you can figure out a time schedule to work where it is more comfortable to work. One time I had a project where it was in the shade in the morning actually, and then afternoon, the wall was in direct sunlight and the productivity just went down. The morale, everybody was just drained, beaten up by the sun. And it was a team of youth, but I managed to sell them on the idea of a 6 a.m. start. So we started at 6 a.m. So we would have 6 hours of working in comfort before the sun crept over and started to burn us. And then we would work maybe for an hour after lunch and finish by 2. So the sales pitch there was we'll start earlier, but they had more of the day left. It was the summertime and they appreciated that. And I think many of them after actually enjoyed it, you know, just even riding their bike or the TTC to work early when everybody else was just getting up. They saw sort of like a romantic novelty to it. And we were able to maximize our productivity and just be more comfortable and fair to ourselves, taking care of ourselves there.
Wow, thank you so much for all that. Let me tell you, I'm taking note of all this. Yes, the working boots are not as you know cool as the beat up Converse, but definitely will make a difference. So thank you so much for that. I hope you know of the great impact that these conversations have in many people, including me, because you're bringing here your experience, your knowledge, and you know that those aspects that you had gone through that had made you realize that these are actually the wise practices to make sure that we all, while working on the field, feel also comfortable and safe. So really appreciate that very much. So we had spoken about your works, we had spoken about what it means to work with the community and in the community, and also what is that personal personal care in order to do the work. Jessey touched on working on heights. I want to just take this opportunity to mention that that's next month's conversation, so stay tuned for that one. And I'm sure you will also bring so many experiences and knowledge to that if you join us as viewers at that moment. I would like to ask you about equipment. You know, talking about safety and being a public space, equipment that goes from the paintbrushes and the paint that you're using to, you know, the cones that you're putting around and the other elements that you need to bring on to be able to do that work that you're doing. So any insights on safety when it comes to that equipment?
I invested in a harness for myself, and sometimes at job sites they'll supply you with harnesses, but the benefit to buying your own harness is that it's kind of will always be sized to you so that you're not always struggling at the beginning of your workday. And then also, you know, the age of the equipment, so then you can kind of trust it more and know it hasn't been kind of hanging around a job site for too long and maybe not as effective. So there's that. The equipment, the boots are important. The safety vests, I think someone else mentioned. Caution tape or cones. Caution tape is a kind of a economical way to barricade yourself or rope off your work area. And one thing I also thought about was the safety of your equipment and your personal belongings. So if you can kind of have a job box on site that you can lock up. So if there is something, a particular piece of equipment or tool that is valuable, extra special to you, then you can kind of lock it up. And while you're working, you're not kind of having to keep an eye out for it all the time. You can just know that it's safe and concentrate on your mural. So those are a few highlights from me.
If I can jump in, those are really great highlights, and I don't want to repeat what you said, so I'll focus mostly on safety for uses of aerosol. Most important thing is to always have a mask. A lot of times people think, oh, I'm painting outside, it's fine. I don't even smell this stuff, but it's the type of thing where it'll catch up to you 20, 30 years down the road. So having the right type of mask is extremely important. And also, as much as it's important to have the mask, have extra sets of filters. One thing that I've learned through aerosol painting is that the respirator filters themselves last for about 8 hours, and then it'll just start filtering whatever's already in there. So you're in essence breathing in a smaller amount of fumes. So it always helps to have an extra set of filters that you can swap and trade out. And one thing I like to do is, even if I'm taking a break, it could be 10 or 15 minutes, I'll just clip the filters off my masks and keep them stored in a Ziploc bag so it's not filtering the air around, and I'm just preserving the length of those filters for as long as possible. So having the right type of masks and extra filters is important. Gloves as well, I find is super important, not just to have like the latex gloves that you can put over your hand to cover, but have gloves that will provide a sense of warmth and security, even if the weather's not too cold outside, because you're holding a metal can, the metal itself gets cold. And so applying constant pressure to that, I've had my hand cramp many times. And so there's just little things that matter in terms of keeping your hands warm and yourself ventilated. Other than that, in terms of working with aerosol, try not to have any open flames or any sort of fire around at all. I find people like to smoke while they're painting. People will have a lighter for other reasons. I just, like oil and water, spray paint and fire don't mix. So if you're using aerosol, avoid flames. Not that I've seen anything happen, but it says right on the can to avoid any sort of open flame. So that's just another consideration I thought of. I guess that's it from me in that regard.
Okay, I'll just pick up there that, yes, it's important to read the safety labels of all the products. So fumes regarding storage of materials, so that the fumes don't sort of leak, even in a storage area where people might be in an office or working, or it might be your studio. So making sure that we read the labels, the instructions. I find that a lot of us will take for granted how to use a piece of equipment. So if we feel that we don't have the time to read the instructions on how to use it, then at least let's have somebody that knows how to use the equipment demonstrate it for us, so we can get some knowledge and some comfort on how to use it safely. And protective wear. So something that I used to take a lot for granted, and I think many of us do when we're younger or when we're starting, is even things like breathing dust from cutting. I've cut a lot of panels for projects, sanding, so even just particle dust, wood dust. If we're dealing with plywood, there's compounds, there's glues in the material. If I wouldn't want my child or my dog breathing it, then why should I be breathing it? and taking care of ourselves that way. Even paints seeping into our system through our porous skin. Our skin is porous. When I was younger, I used to enjoy traveling on the TTC with my hands covered in paint and seeing the attention that would get and the questions that would bring from people, or little kids would comment and say, oh, look at your hands are all green. And slowly I got less and less happy coming home and scrubbing that paint off my hands, realizing that it was pouring stuff into my, or getting into my system through my porous skin. Even if it says it's non-toxic, it's not meant to be in our bodies. And it's all accumulative, even eyewear. So if you're cutting, sanding, having glasses to protect your eyes, it's like riding a motorcycle without a helmet and just getting your eyes scraped up over the years. I think that the things that we expose ourselves to, the materials that can be harmful, it's too much even for one day. I don't think it's good to be leaving ourselves exposed and vulnerable for one day, and definitely not for years if we're making a career out of it. So the sooner that we can start protecting ourselves from these things, the better, and the healthier we'll be, and the happier I think we'll be in our work, because we're not seeing it as a passion that is harming us at the same time. We know that we're doing it safely, and we can enjoy it all the more better and all the longer.
I was thinking here that I could be, listening to the three of you for hours and hours and hours. It is amazing the amount of knowledge that comes from this conversation. So I am definitely taking note of very important elements that you're saying. And it is very clear that you are not only a community engaged artist, mural artist, but also that there is, this very strong component of mentorship. And that's what I felt when I was listening to the three of you referring to the different aspects that you take into account when you look into the equipment, from acknowledging that sometimes we like the attention that the cool artists receive, to also taking ownership of our own health by putting attention to the important aspects that Rob shared as well, or like all this knowledge about aerosol, the use of aerosol. And I'm sure that there is more to learn about the different types of painting that we use to create the murals, and the amount of conversations that we can drop out of that. We, at MUSE Arts are very engaged in youth mentorship and also creating some sort of like succession plan. Like we need to start engaging youth in loving the community arts, the mural art, in being part of these processes as creators, as dreamers as well. And I would like to ask each one of you, even if you want to, to talk to your younger self, what is that one thing that you would like to pass on to a young person that is starting in the field of mural art? And that person could be starting because they are young, or because I just heard my voice somewhere, but so they could start it because they are very young, or because they are artists that are engaging now in mural art, or they are newcomer artists that are doing the work as well. So what would be that one thing that you would like to share with them based on the many years of experience on the field that you have?
I'll start. Just with the safety stuff that we've been saying, I think the most important thing is to take care of ourselves. Sort of like they say, if a plane is going down, first you have to put the mask on yourself before you can put it on the child or the person next to you. I think that's what's important. The things that we take for granted, we think we're very resilient, I can tough it out, or I can go this day, or I can put myself into these conditions. But again, I think it goes back to treating others. Well, no, this time treating ourselves like we'd like others to be treated. The others that we care about. If we wouldn't want our child, our pet to suffer the same scenario, then why should we inflict it on ourselves? So the most important thing, I think, is be kind to yourself with time management, not overworking yourself, stressing yourself, not putting yourself into compromising situations where maybe the wall is even just not suitable to paint on. And then it could come back and be a liability to you because you did a great job, you used all the right products, but because the wall was deteriorating to begin with and it wasn't ready for a project to be painted, it should have been repaired first. Then somebody can say, well, look, you ruined my wall, you painted it and now it's falling apart and there's water coming through, where there was water coming through before and that needed to be addressed before. So really just being as fair to yourself as you can.
Thank you so much for that. I want to make reference to the aspect of liability as an element of artist wellness. I think, thinking of, those insurance coverage and the things that we have to look after before starting a project is such an important element. Thank you for bringing that up as an element of artist wellness as well. Thank you, Rob. Anybody else?
I would say to not be afraid to speak up if you see something happening that you don't feel comfortable with, or if you feel that there's a safety aspect to the project that's missing. So be comfortable with your own voice and be confident in expressing your observations and opinions. Sometimes people will take shortcuts and you don't feel like that's maybe the proper way to go about something. So don't feel pushed into a situation that doesn't speak to you. Also, be open to the possibilities that this career is going to take you in. So you'll have opportunities to travel and meet new people, and it's a great journey that's just beginning.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for saying that. As soon as you say like traveling, I'm like, okay, I'm taking the three of you to Colombia. I don't know. And also, calling to that aspect of speaking up and trusting your intuition, and also trusting what you know and what your body knows and what feels right and what doesn't feel right. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's something very important, particularly when working with youth. There is power dynamics in groups, right? And so the person, the mentor, the teacher that knows best in the youth that is supposed to be receiving the knowledge. And that happens a lot also with the newcomer communities, where artists had so many years of experience but are also coming into the country, and so looking for that Canadian experience, and so having to kind of go along with things that they instinctively and intuitively know that are not correct. So thank you for mentioning and making reference to that as well.
For me, I guess I will say that what we do is so physical, and a lot of times people don't necessarily think about that physicality. Oh, it's just painting. I can tough it out. But it's so important to think about the physicality of mural painting and what we're bending at weird angles, and we're reaching, sometimes guilty, reaching over the ladder to get a little further. These things are very important to consider and somewhat kind of dangerous. So our physical wellness is so important if we want to A, do what we do well, and B, do it for a long time. I think we really need to consider our physical wellness. And I guess I would also say to my younger self, don't take no for an answer until the answer is no. Consistency and persistence is key. If you really want to find some form of success, whatever that means to you, I think consistency is key. Have a sense of discipline in yourself and in what you do, because I find that discipline just brings up the caliber and quality of everything that you're doing and presenting. So approach it with discipline and do it with integrity. And I forgot the last point, but there was something. If it comes back to me, I'll ask if I could jump in again.
Please do.
That's what I'll say.
You know what? I think I'm going to ask StreetARToronto if we can start building a mural artist manifesto, because this is fantastic. I think it's extremely powerful what you all have shared as an element of passing on the wisdom and the knowledge Thank you very much for that. And the very last question, or the very last element that I want to, sorry, I have to ask this question that I have here before I go into my last piece, and I will ask you if you can probably summarize your answer for this, although it's very important. As pedestrian, is there something that I can do to make your job easier or support your craft?
It's just always really nice to have someone say looks great, or thank you, or something. Like, it gives you a boost straight away, and kind of makes your day and gives you the energy to carry on. And it may come at a time when you're feeling like something's not going right, or you feel like it's taking you too long. So I think just as a pedestrian, to feel comfortable to express your opinion on the mural, and hopefully it's a nice one. So, but saying something like that is really positive and goes a long way.
Thank you.
That all positive validation and constructive criticism is welcome.
Amazing, thank you.
I don't know if this is gonna sound bad, but clear the way. Like, I find sometimes when people want to come up and they're really passionate and want to, but sometimes they get too close, and that could impede the actual work itself. So just, I don't know, be mindful of space, not clear the way, but just be mindful of spacing and boundaries.
That sounds all good to me. Like it is amazing how much like I can relate to these things that you are making reference to, because it's like, yes, you're right. So thank you so much for that. And the last piece, before we welcome the StreetARToronto team for some of the announcements that they have, is I'm going to talk about money. I'm going to talk about money in relation to how many times we compromise safety and our well-being, to be able to manage those budgets. And most of the time is when working with private projects, right? So I don't have a specific question for that, but I just want to throw this there, like, let's end in a very high note. Let's talk about money and compromising safety for that, for that money, whatever amount is regarding a specific project. So I'm going to let you, the experts, touch on that.
Okay.
Yes, please, Rob.
Start with sort of picking up on something I mentioned earlier, where it can become a liability. So one specific scenario was that I was asked to paint a mural on a wall that was by a private pool. And I went to go see the space. It was an indoor pool. And I went to go see the space, and there were severe mold issues on the walls. There was paint bubbling, crackling, there was actual mold. So there was definitely ventilation, moisture issues at that indoor pool. And no matter, and this is something that I said before and that I say to many people that I'm sort of mentoring or that are starting, I'll say that that's not a situation that you want to get into, and it's not a situation that I wanted to get into. No matter how maybe desperate we are for work, to pay our bills, to build our portfolio, to build our career, it's not worth putting ourselves into a compromising situation, which could add up to a lot worse than the X amount that we would make for that project. That liability could come back with, even a liability claim, an insurance claim. It could come back with you now having to go back several times to fix the issue, where it wasn't what you did, but it was there, something that was there from before you even got there. Pick and choose our compromises. Maybe we can compromise that we'll get paid less on this project because it's a really fun project. I understand I'm building my portfolio, but at least I'm safe. It's a good wall. I know that I'll get a good experience out of it. I'll get a good portfolio piece out of it. So maybe I'm comfortable working for less, but not do not compromise on budget where it's materials that are compromised or the condition of the site, the wall to surface, because even low quality materials can also become a liability. They will not withstand the elements if it's exterior as well. They will fade faster. And again, somebody that doesn't appreciate the value of the work doesn't appreciate that the budget for the materials should have been $1,200 and they managed to squeeze you to do it for $600. So, you know, maybe you used a sub-quality primer, the latex paint wasn't what you should have been using, the acrylic wasn't artist quality. So people that want art, they have to appreciate and pay for that appreciation accordingly. Yeah, just to not compromise on things that should not be compromised on, and that's safety with the materials and the products that we're using and the location.
I was going to say, sorry, Jessey.
No, go ahead. I'll just
Just someone mentioned this to me like at the very start of my career, and it was invest in good tools. So some of the equipment I've had for years, and I've bought whatever you can afford. So get the best tool that you can afford, and it'll last you for a long time. So that goes into the aspect of safety. So get the safety equipment that you can afford that will help you with your career, and it'll give back to you. It kind of might hurt a little bit at the beginning, but it'll last you for so long that it'll pay for itself many times over. So don't go for the cheapest thing out there.
I guess to add on, I'll say in terms of compromise, I don't know how this is going to sound, but my own personal views on this is never compromise your safety, and only compromise your funding if it's a situation that you're also receiving an equal sort of replacement for that lack of funding. So maybe they're going to help promote your artwork or promote your social feeds. Maybe they're going to help by donating some in-kind things. And part of this is because I'm a graffiti artist, and folks in the business realm have, I guess, in a sense, not taken you as seriously because you're just a graffiti, just a youth artist. So I found that I had to be really resilient over time and really had to become good at staying firm and holding my ground. So just personally, I never compromise on anything to do with safety. Pricing wise, I compromise only when it's mutually beneficial. And depending on who you're dealing with, I just tell people that I'm expensive. Not to like freak them out, but just so that right from the very beginning, they're aware that to do what they want to do, there's going to be a cost associated with this, and it might be substantial, but that's what you are investing in when you want quality. I have this saying that I like to, I guess it's something that I've lived by over the years. Arts are not a necessity, it's a luxury. And so if people are going to be asking us to create for them, they better be prepared to pay some luxury prices. So that's just something I've used that's helped me along the way to be able to hold my ground and really get paid fairly, but also ensure that I have the funding to make sure that the job sites are safe for myself and for those that are going to be enjoying with me.
This is wonderful. I honestly don't know where the time went. We're very close to end this very, very fruitful and beautiful and inspiring conversation. And I want to thank each one of you for your generosity, for sharing so much of yourselves with all of us here in the live streaming, but also those who are going to be watching this video through YouTube. So thank you so much for doing that.